everybody! Welcome to this week's episode of Use Your Words. Today I'm going to be talking about how important it is for women to share their stories with other women, most importantly their daughters. I'll be highlighting the work of Joyce McFadden, a psychoanalyst who has a practice in New York over 20 years, and the creator of the Women's Reality Study and author of Your Daughter's Bedroom: Insights to Raising Confident Women. I had the pleasure of meeting Joyce McFadden last December at the Center for Family Life Education's National Sex Education Conference. She spoke about her book and how the Women's Reality Study came to be. In her practice, she would hear women talking about their experience, often with great shame and embarrassment, and feeling like they were the only ones, this really isolated feeling, an isolated experience. But she would hear lots of women describing the same experiences, including this feeling of isolation. As she began to connect those stories and tell her patients that other women were also experiencing the same kinds of feelings, the shame lightened and the isolation lessened. And in an effort to be able to share that with more than just the women in her clients, she created the Women's Reality Study. In August 2005, the Women's Reality Study was born. It consisted of 63 open-ended questionnaires covering a wide variety of topics relevant to women's life experiences. Written with inclusive language, McFadden covered topics such as relationships, both personal and love relationships, sexuality, singleness, career employment, mental and physical health, fertility, infertility, women who have not had children, appearance, and life transitions. Over 450 women initially completed the questionnaires from ages ranging 18 to 105 years old. Her book, Your Daughter's Bedroom: Insights to Raising Confident Women, describes the responses from 3 of the most popular of the questionnaires. It was impossible to include all 63 questionnaires from everyone who responded. And so McFadden decided to choose the 3 most popular questionnaires, the questions that garnered the most responses. Can you guess which ones they were? The first most popular questionnaire, menstruation. The second most popular questionnaire, women's relationships with their mothers. And the third, masturbation. From the start of the book, McFadden is clear that this isn't some sort of negative judgment about mothers and the way that they're mothering their daughters. In fact, she acknowledges how we often aren't equipped to raise our daughters in sex-positive environments. So she doesn't use the word sex-positive, but as a sex-positive parent, and while reading her book, I'm pretty clear that her attitude and philosophy around sexuality is filled with positivity. While I found the entire book incredibly interesting and helpful, I was really struck by this idea that when we become mothers, when women become mothers, that we lose our sexuality, that we're no longer sexual beings. You may have been sexual to be able to get pregnant and give birth, but not anymore. Now you're doing something completely different. And you don't think about yourself as a sexual being, and the world and culture around us doesn't think about us as sexual beings. So how does that influence our daughters? And how does that influence our daughters' sense of sexuality within themselves and what they have to look forward to in the future? McFadden stresses the importance of our daughters seeing us as fully sexual beings, and that we share our sexuality and our stories with our girls. This has always been a tricky place for me. I understand that our children learn so much from just watching us, who we are in the world, and how we react and respond. At the same time, I've always been concerned that if I shared too much information, I'd be sexualizing my daughter, but if I didn't share enough, that she wouldn't have a healthy model to be able to base her own actions and decisions on as she's experimenting with life. McFadden says clearly that she's not necessarily advocating for us to share the specifics of our sex life, and that this isn't a yes or no question, that it's actually much more complex than that. She writes, "What I advocate is giving our daughters, slowly and in small doses, the informational and emotional support that will foster the same sense of well-being in their sexuality that we'd want for them in any other area of their lives. I'm advocating an openness that makes it clear to our daughters that teaching them about their sexuality is far from being something to fear, but a privilege of mothering." That was a pretty powerful statement for me, because once again, I realized that I still have layers to peel. That even though I'm doing the best I can to be sex positive in my own life and in raising my children, that this overculture, that our overculture, still has this incredible impact on me. And while what I read is something that I try to aspire to on a daily basis, why is it that I feel differently about the information that I would share with my daughter around sexuality that I do around any of the other topics that we talk about? Tricky or not tricky, spirituality, politics. So this felt incredibly affirming, because I think instinctually this is where I am, that I know what's appropriate and not appropriate to share with my daughter, but still this overculture seems to affect the way that I communicate with her. At the same time, it felt incredibly challenging, because these are feelings that I'm carrying not only into my relationship with my children, but these are the feelings that I'm carrying around with me in all of my relationships. And so it reminds me that as a sex-positive parent, I need to constantly be aware, self-aware, of where my attitudes and feelings, fears and insecurities are coming from, and just as important, to surround myself with others that share my particular values and the way that I'm wishing to communicate with my children. McFadden is very clear that our daughters' sense of who they are in the world begins in the home. And when I think of the current war that's waging right now by the conservative right against women in this country, it feels even more important and very political for me to be very clear about my personal values and the values that I wish to instill in my children, and to be communicating those values with clarity and consistency. I'd like to express my gratitude to Joyce McFadden for the work that she's done around women's experiences in life and raising their daughters, her affirmation and her support. I'd also like to remind all of you that the Women's Reality Study questionnaires are still available for completion. The link you can find here, as well as a link to Joyce McFadden's book, Your Daughter's Bedroom, Insights to Raising Confident Women. I will say that when I heard her speak, one of the first things she said was that she did not have any choice or control around the title of the book, nor the cover picture. So if you have any issues with the sexualization of the title and the topic, which seem to be quite contradictory to the material within the book, please raise that with the publisher. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Use Your Words. We will definitely be back next Tuesday, a week from today. Hope to see you then. In the meantime, good luck with all of your sex-positive conversations with your young people and with any people.